So this podcast is one that I went into Glasgow to the Bacchus Bar basement again. It's one of
never out of the place.
Never out of the place. Whenever I'm in the city centre, they know me now when I go in. So I went in and recorded this. So it's a meeting that Mary McCabe of Glasgow Pensioners for Indy set up with Colette Walker, who is the leader of the Independence for Scotland party. You and I actually bumped into Colette when we were up at Bannockburn the other week, and how do we chat there? It's on that podcast that we did. I've interviewed her once before for the last Holyrood election, and what the Pensioners for Indy are doing is that over some months they're inviting people. Well, they're hoping to have people from every independent supporting party to come and chat to them. I've already had Colin Fox. Colette was the next one of the ISP, and it's just interesting hearing her talk about. She talks a bit about herself and what's got her into this position where she's putting herself forward for Holyrood. She's not someone who's in it to be a career politician, but she tells you a bit about the background, and then she tells you a bit about the thinking of ISP, where to stand, and how they will be cooperating with other smaller indie supporting parties. So it's worthwhile listening to. There's some good points made.
So we'll go over to the Bacchus Bar.
Our guest today is Colette Walker, who's founder and leader of the Independence for Scotland party. You founded the ISP just
5 years ago.
5 years ago. 5 years ago. And she's been a political activist in various causes for over 20 years. She's registered blind herself and cares for her disabled son, and she fights for disability rights and equality rights all everywhere. She also is involved with campaigning against free ports and special economic zones. She does this along with Salvo, but by herself as well. And on an international level, of course, she's working with Salvo on the submission to the United Nations. Over to you, Colette, and tell us all about it.
Okay, well, thank you for having me along today. It's a quite exciting time leading up to next year's election, but let's go back a wee bit. As Mary said, I've been campaigning as a grassroots activist for 20 odd years. Thank you for reminding me that I'm that old nowadays. But again, really it was because, as Mary said, I've got a son who is multiply disabled. He's totally blind and profoundly autistic and non-verbal. And I think really at that time it was just a constant fight for his well-being, the social services that I had to look at, education, everything that he required. It was always a fight, and I realised that I kind of neglected myself as somebody who has a visual impairment. I don't class it as a disability. I hate anything that begins with DIS. It's very negative, and I'm not a negative person. I always try and look at the positive side of things. So my visual impairment is part of me. It doesn't define me as a person. And I think I was that determined even as a younger person, even though, believe it or not, I was actually very shy and I wouldn't have said boo to a fly. I don't know how I got into this job, but never mind. I was determined that it wasn't going to define me, and I started seeing the medical, the social model that were the barriers to me as a person. But you kind of neglect yourself, as you know yourself. If you're an unpaid carer or you're a mother or whatever, you neglect yourself and you always think of the other person, right? So that was the way it was with me until, as I say, my son came along, and then I started to realise, wait a minute, things are broken, severely broken for people who have long-term health conditions, disability as they call it, or anybody that is just vulnerable in society, and it's always a fight. So I then felt that if you needed somebody to speak up and speak out, and I suppose the lioness came out in me with my son, because obviously as a mother, you want the best for your child, no matter what condition they have, or, because everybody's equal, everybody's unique, we're nobody's perfect. So again, it's went along the lines of, you know, fighting equality, accessibility rights, and it's progressed. In 2016, the Scottish Government started a pilot scheme called the Access to Elected Office Fund. I don't know if anybody has heard of that. A lot of people are quite negative about the Scottish Government, maybe rightly so for quite a few things, but this actually was something that was very progressive. Westminster don't hold it. It's actually a scheme, a fund that is run by Inclusion Scotland that actually enables people that have got long-term health conditions or disability to actually be able to stand for elected office, because there is such a lack of proper representation in our Parliament and our local councils. So they were looking at the barriers that anybody has and how they were going to overcome them. So that could be whether it be to do with transport, or whether it was to do with equipment, or for even for the likes of myself, that I would maybe need to pay for a personal assistant, a sight guide to go out campaigning and going to events such as, like, you know, Paul has helped me today. So they were looking at the ways that they could actually overcome the barriers. Now in 2016 I was approached by Inclusion Scotland and I was asked, do you want to be part of this pilot scheme for the 2017 council election? And at that point I thought, well, why would anybody really want to listen to me? Because that's the mindset that you have. You know, you didn't go to university, I didn't have a political degree or anything like that. I'm just a grassroots activist. But I was very keen to watch how the progress and the pilot scheme went. Now 40 people applied for the post and the fund. And I think at that time, it was 17 people were actually elected. So it was just under half. And it was a split of male and female. So I thought, oh, that's actually quite interesting. So they were able to stand, and they probably might not have been able to stand for council elections if this fund wasn't there. And people have listened to what they were saying in their campaign. So that gave me a wee bit of encouragement, and I thought, right, okay, well, you know, and at that point I wasn't actually a member of a political party either. So I did join the SNP for a very, very short period of time, but I then realised that leading up to the 2021 there was so much talk about getting as many MSPs in our Parliament who supported independence. But our do-want system doesn't work for a one-party strategy. So there was a lot of talk about a regional list party, and I am not a type of person that goes into a meeting to go into another meeting to go into. I'm not a talking shop type of person. I'm very proactive. I just like to get the job done. I like to be really quite active. So I was fed up of people just talking about it. So a colleague of mine and I were talking, and we just said one night, why are we waiting for this to happen? Why don't we just do it? And I went, okay, that's fine. So, as you do, so we started looking up how to set up a political party, completely out of my comfort zone. Nothing that I'd ever thought that, you know, the only time I really wanted to get into politics before I got into that is really so that people with life experience were round the table talking about policy making. Because I'm fed up of people talking about a particular condition or subject and they've got no experience of it at all, but they think they know better because they've got a degree or whatever. Theory is completely different from practical. So I am part of quite a lot of cross-party groups within our Holyrood Parliament. And as I say, I'm now co-chair with Sight Scotland for their policy group. So policy is really important to me. So that's really where I came from. So actually to turn round and say, oh, let's set up a political party, that really wasn't in my remit. So we started in 2000. I knew I was going to be leaving the SNP after the general election. I'd already made my decision. I was doing that anyway. So around about December, after I went out campaigning for Joanna Cherry, etc., I left, and we started looking up how to set up political party. So we gathered a few people, we done a lot of market research, got a few people on board, started doing the constitution, the financial scheme, all the things that all the boring stuff that you've got to do behind the scenes. And then we submitted. Now, we submitted in the February, March time. And then COVID hit. So that was fun. And at the same time, I was actually going through, I'd actually just finished my training with my guide dog, who's underneath the table here. I literally came home on the Friday, and I was still waiting to hear from the Electoral Commission whether we'd been approved or not. Brought her home on the Friday, the 13th of March, and a week on the Monday we got locked down for COVID. Well, great, I've got a guide dog, got nowhere to go with her, fantastic. So it was a very interesting time, but then I remember one day, and you remember, it was beautiful weather, it was roasting, and Barley and I went out for a walk one day, as we did every day, went out for our usual walk. She was getting very bored going the same route, so was I, but we weren't allowed to go anywhere else. But I got a phone call from my colleague who'd helped set it up, and she said to me, "Have you looked at your emails?" And I said, "No, I'm out." She said, "We've just been approved by the Electoral Commission," and I just went, "Oh my God, really?" Then it became real. So I actually don't remember that whole walk. It's a complete and utter blur. I don't know where I went. I haven't got a clue how long I was out for, because I think in my head I was just thinking, how did that happen? This is no, what, really? So I don't actually, COVID was a very interesting time for me. I had no time to be bored, because I was setting up a political party with an iPad on my kitchen table, gathering up, like the launch of it, the website, gathering up members, committees, vetting panels, people that wanted to stand for candidate, all the branches, bank accounts. It was 14, 15, 16-hour days, 7 days a week. It was just constant. But do you know something? It was so stimulating, and I knew I was doing it so that we could then be a regional list party and to get as many MSPs who supported independence into our parliament the following year. So through not having an inkling ever of being what they class a politician, I can't stand that word, I like to use elected representative, because that's what we're supposed to be, is your representative. I had no inclination of being where I am today, but I always say things happen for a reason. If it wasn't meant to be, I wouldn't have been doing what I was doing. So I'm here now 5 years on, as mainly most of you will know, that when it came to the final kind of few days before nominations were to be submitted, ALAPA launched, and it wasn't a decision I was very happy with, obviously, because of all the work that I put in, but we done a democratic vote to let ALAPA stand with Alex Salmond at the helm. It didn't go our way, it didn't work. The strategy, I think, because he came in too late, it wasn't right. If he had just backed ISP, the momentum was there, our candidates were there, the message was getting out. He adopted our message and our strategy, but I think for them it was too late in the running to start, because they were just getting candidates at the last minute. Ours were vetted, they'd been campaigning, crowdfunding, etc, etc. Anyway, again, things happen for a reason. It didn't work in our favour then, but things have now moved on considerably, and we're speaking a different language now. We're now talking about, because of Salvo, ISP's always talked about Scottish sovereignty and direct democracy, proper Scottish political structures that we've had before this fictional union. We've always been talking about that, so that's why we're quite aligned very well with Salvo. So then when Salvo came along, we're now hearing a different language: sovereignty, the claim of right, decolonisation, territorial sovereignty. There's all these different terminologies, phrases that nobody ever, liberation, not independence, all these different things that nobody was talking about 4 or 5 years ago. So again, I'm at the stage now that we're getting to this really exciting time again, the way it was when I set up ISP. We're now in a slightly different era. We're in a different chapter. Another door's open for us. And I think, as I say, things do happen for a reason. That if you got elected, I don't think we would have been much further anyway, to be fair, because there is, the political structure in our parliament, because it's an executive arm, they wouldn't give us a referendum anyway. So now where we're at with the decolonisation, it's a whole different ball game now. So I think we've actually had to go through that really bad experience in 2021 to actually get to where we are now and actually start galvanising the movement again and actually bring it back to a people movement and not a political movement. I think that's where we are now. So I think really with Salvo, as Mary was saying, Salvo started a few years ago, and I hadn't been able to go to a few of the initial launch meetings just due to weather, etc. And one of my exec had went to a couple of meetings and she would give us feedback. And don't get me wrong, I had more questions than answers, because again, it was all new to me as well, like what, even though we had been talking about the Scottish Crown and we were sovereign and we had done quite a lot of blogs and articles about it in direct democracy, but just with the whole structure of where Salvo was coming from, I'm like, well, how does that work? But it's good to question. It's good to analyse. It's, no question's ever stupid. So I then was invited to speak at, believe it or not, an ALAPA event in Edinburgh, it would be 2.5 years ago in January, 2 years ago. And I didn't realise Sarah was actually in the audience. And at that time, I don't know if you remember, they were talking about Stone of Destiny. And it was because of the coronation and all this nonsense, and it was going to go down to Westminster and blah, blah, blah. Well, we were starting a kind of petition and saying, talking about that. And with what I was saying at the ALAPA meeting, and I was saying to Alex and Neil Hanvey and Kenny McCaskill, no disrespect, but I really don't want any elected representatives down in Westminster. We don't belong there. We want you up here. They need to be here. And we are a party of abstentionism. We will not swear an oath to any foreign monarch. We are an abstentionism party. So I did turn round to them because they were sitting behind me, and I said, no disrespect, but I don't want you down there. You don't belong there. You're serving no purpose. And after that, Sarah got in contact with me because, again, we are very aligned. And really, again, if things happen for a reason. If I hadn't went there, if I hadn't been doing what I've been doing for the past few years, I wouldn't have met Sarah. We wouldn't have been doing the stuff like with Salvo, such as a couple of years ago we done the Stirling Directive to actually try and out the Scottish Government, to actually get them to admit that you're working under the executive arm of Westminster. This is not a people's parliament. No. It is Westminster, just on a smaller scale. And you are actually abiding by their rules, and you're basically getting told, know your place, do as you're told, and we'll give you a little bit of pittance and you can do what you want with it. But we'll criticise you for doing what you're doing with that wee pittance of money. We will criticise you for it.
Veto it sometimes.
Absolutely. Exactly. So we wanted them to try and, have a backbone and say, yeah, we do realise we're working under these conditions, but they just won't. They completely ignored us. We actually had to send the letter. We had 2 letters to them. We went to Holyrood. We had to go to the back entrance of Holyrood. The caretaker took it. Then myself and my deputy Julie and Alex Thorburn from Salvo and Liberate Scotland, who is in an electric wheelchair. So there's me with the guide dog, him with the electric wheelchair, having to go round to the back of St Andrew's House into the mailing room to hand this letter in. we were not allowed. You know, it was like we weren't even second-class citizens, we were third-class citizens. It was appalling. And of course then what happens, you get the unionist media on social media, oh look at them, you know, blah blah, and it gave them ammunition to absolutely slate us. It made us look silly, but that's what they do. And I don't know about you, but I'm utterly fed up of it. You know, I am really fed up of it. So we've done the Stirling Directive. Again, sadly, it didn't, like everything else, it doesn't get the coverage, it doesn't get the exposure. We invited all the media, etc. They didn't attend. But now, obviously, they set up the Liberation Committee. I didn't take part in that because, again, Liberation Scotland and Salvo are non-partisan, and I don't think it's my place as leader of a political party to even volunteer to be part of the Liberation Committee. It's not a good look. So my deputy, who co-chaired it for the first 8-9 months, but as leader, I don't think so. I've stepped back from that, but obviously very supportive of the work they were doing, and was kept in contact with, you know, obviously what was happening. But even last year, when Sarah and we were speaking at The Hague, at the Netherlands for Scottish Independence Rally, and my case went missing, which I find very strange, but never mind, that's another story. Yeah, but yes, my case went missing, and I had my iPad and all that in it, but you know, it never left Edinburgh, but Sarah's did, but you know, that's by the way. But I had medication that was in my case that I needed to take. So of course, we ended up having to get a taxi and go to the hospital in Amsterdam, big story. But even in the taxi, the guy was asking us, oh, what you're here for? And of course we started talking. And he had, again, a totally misrepresented view of how Scotland is in this union, why we're wanting independence. So Sarah and I put him right. Let's put it this way, we utilised the time in the taxi very, very well. It was a good source of getting the word out. And again, that just takes him then to go and speak to another taxi driver, or go home and say, oh, guess who was in my taxi today, or whatever. So again, communication is vital. This is where it's really important. Like, you know, I'm here today, you do your stalls, you hold meetings. Just even talking to one more person and enlightening them about what actually has happened and what's not actually happening, and let them think. And I remember saying to my dad in 2014, my dad would listen to the BBC, you know, and again, as a daughter, no matter what age I was, he always thought, well, what do you know? You're only a wee girl, kind of thing. But I remember standing with him, and I said, Dad, I'm going to ask you one question, and it's still valid today. If we were such a financial burden on Westminster, why are they so keen to keep us if we're such a drain to them? And he just looked at me and he went, oh, I never thought about it like that. Right. So you turn it on its head, because they will use every scaremongering. But if you just turn it on its head, so that then started changing his mind. But one thing my dad did say when he started looking into things with me, and I started showing him stuff, and again, it's to this day, why is the Scottish Government not showing the proper figures of revenue that we are sending down there and we're not getting back? Why are they going with the GERS figures? Why are they not showing the true facts? Why are they not speaking out more? And that was from my father, who didn't support independence up until I started then turning it on its head with him. He then started questioning, why is the Scottish Government, who's supposed to be wanting independence, not actually speaking out more about what has been taken from us and the pittance that we're getting back, etc. You know, so it actually only takes talking to that one person, because then he started talking to his friend at the swimming. Oh, guess what my daughter said? Or, you know, so it does spread the word. Now, one thing you will know with me is when I campaign for something, I will say it loud and I will say it proud and I will speak up no matter how much abuse I get for it. If I know it's morally and principally right, for me anyway, but for the people that are dear to me, and that's the people of Scotland, because that's fundamentally what we are doing this whole campaign for, no matter what part of it is.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Well, I heard anyway that you were going to be banding up with other parties, pro-independence parties, and all standing under the one ticket.
Yes.
Could you say a wee bit about that?
Okay, so that's Liberate Scotland. Basically, we need a political alliance now. So people are fed up with political parties, and believe me, I don't blame them. If I wasn't doing the job that I was doing, I wouldn't be part of a political party. You know, as I say, I was only in the SNP for a very, very short period of time. So I don't blame people for staying non-partisan. That actually doesn't matter whether if you're in a party or not. It's actually, as I say, the cross that you put on the ballot paper is the most important thing. It's the cause that you're actually making your stance on when you go to the ballot. So I think now, for many years, you've all seen it on social media, why can't you all put your differences aside? Why can't you work together? Well, we've listened to that and we have came together. As I said earlier on, we stood down for Alipar in 2021 because we felt it was the right thing to do. For the country, it's country not party, that's our hashtag, country before party. It's not about a party, it's not about a person, it's not about a profile, it's about Scotland and it's about everybody that lives in Scotland. So we had initial few meetings and it was Indie for Indie and ISP initially that came together because again I'd been working with Alan Petrie last year regarding changing the oath. Which again the Scottish Government and John Swinney and Angus Robertson want nothing to do with because you know that this is just the way it is and we're not willing to fight or put our head above the parapet. It's just the way it is. Deal with it. No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to deal with it. No, sorry. So we did put our differences aside. So Indie for Indie and ISP decided that we were going to start this this alliance, this initiative, and then the Sovereignty Party came on board as well. Again, it's still open to anybody that wants to come on board, but I obviously I don't think the SNP will ever do. I don't think the Greens will. Alipar, it's up to them. I can't speak for them, but as far as I know at the present moment, they're just staying on their own, and that's fine. But again, so there's the three of us, Liberate Scotland. We are going to be standing in constituencies and the region. The reason why we're standing in the constituencies, and I know that I got it in 2020, I got it in 2021, I got it when I stood in the by-election in Rutherglen, you're going to split the vote. I'm sorry, we live in a democracy, not a dictatorship. Independence does not equate SNP and vice versa. I'm sorry, it doesn't. It's not about a party. Up until recent times, if you supported independence, yes, you normally would have had to have voted SNP. I understand that. Things again have moved on. We're in another door has opened. We're on a different pathway. We're on a different route. But it shouldn't be about just one party. And we've shown that, sadly, we were proven right in 2021 regarding our dual system because the SNP wanted SNP 1 and 2. What happened? And I've done a few months ago a complete analysis of the 2016 and the 2021 elections. And I'd done all the votes in all the regions and then I added them all up. Now, in 2016, they got 4 list seats. And in 2021, they got over 1 million votes, 1,064,000 votes, and they got 2 seats. They lost 2 seats. We still will get this. But in 2011, even Alex Salmon said to me on the phone, that was a fluke. It was a complete and utter fluke. Even he admitted it. What we say again, turning it on its head, well, how many constituency seats would you like the SNP to lose to get a couple of more regional list seats? You have to turn it on its head when they come away with this kind of thing. If I was in Parliament and if I had been part of the SNP, if I was part of the leadership, I would have then strategically said, listen, people still don't understand the deontment system. The easiest and most effective way to get a majority into our Parliament is for us not to stand any regional list candidates at all. We will concentrate in the constituency and then let a regional list party like ISP or Alipar or an independent candidate, anybody you want, SSP, whatever, and that makes it a lot easier. Can you imagine what could have happened if those million votes went to Alipar or SSP or independent candidates? We could have had at least 20, 30 more MSPs in there that supported Scottish independence. So really, as I say, this is why we are now standing in the constituency, because one, we've seen over the past few years the decline in people actually going out to vote. Right, I stood in the 2023 by-election in Rutherglen. It was a very high-profiled by-election, because of what happened with Margaret. It was on all the media. Actually, the media picked that up for a change. It makes a nice change. So it was a really high-profile by-election. We got about a 24% turnout. And people were actually saying to me, and again, it's all about speaking to people. If you weren't standing, Colette, I wouldn't have went out and voted. Now, I wasn't in it to win it because Westminster, I was standing on abstentionism. I don't want anywhere near Westminster. It's nothing to do with me. But I wanted to give people that democratic right to go out and vote and not just stay at home. I don't want apathy. I want galvanisation. I want momentum. I want a people movement again. So I stood, and as I say, so many people were saying to me, if you weren't standing, I would have either spoiled my ballot paper or I just wouldn't have went out to vote. That's hopeless. We're not going to get change if people are in that mindset. So we need to change the mindset. So this is why we're standing in the constituencies. Now, for smaller parties like ISP and Sovereignty will be standing as ISP and Sovereignty in the constituencies, and it will be Liberate Scotland in the region, because we will be standing together under that banner, and it will be one line and one policy only: independence, nothing less, nothing else. That is it. Don't ask us about policies to do with Liberate Scotland, because that is it. It's very, very clear and precise. That is it. But we want people to come out and vote. And the only way we can really encourage that, because if they're not going to vote in the constituency, because like, oh, I'm not voting for them. No, fed up with them. I'm not even going to hold my nose. They're not going to go out and then just vote in the region, because a lot of people still don't understand how crucial the regional list vote is, right? So we are wanting people to come out and campaign with us, get the movement going. They're actually campaigning for an alliance, not a political party, not a person, and an alliance that wants independence, nothing else. So we want all the groups to come out and actually chap on doors, do stalls, stuff envelopes, do anything you possibly can, and get the momentum going and get out there and actually use your vote. But the regional list vote is crucial. If you remember, when we first got our devolved parliament, it was Labour that took the constituency votes, and the SNP, SSP, Pensioners for Indy, all the independent candidates, they got in the region. Nicola Sturgeon, and again, people forget this, her first time that she got elected, after not being elected in quite a few elections that she stood for, she didn't get it in first time round. You know, people forget this. People forget that
She was on the list
many times and did not get voted in. But when she did get voted in, it was on the regional list. I know people slag, oh, you know, you've got so-and-so from the Tory or so-and-so from Labour. That's fair enough, people will do that. But for our movement, for our country right now, the regional list is crucial. It is crucial. So really, we're wanting, as Liberate Scotland, as an alliance, we have put our differences aside. We don't agree with everything. Again, not everybody that supports Scottish independence agrees with everything that could possibly be as an independent Scotland. You know, there's visions. You know, our manifesto might have visions about universal basic income or being an EFTA, or we're giving people, look, this is just a vision. This is ideas of what we could possibly do in an independent Scotland. We're not telling you this is what's going to happen or what we are going to impose on you if we become, you know, independent. This is us saying, you know, we've lived in a, oh, well, this is the way it is. This is the way it's always been. That kind of colonial mindset. Oh, well, that's just the way it always is. That's the way it is. You know, I don't know anything different. It's like being in an abusive relationship. Oh, well, he said he was sorry, but you know, he loves me really. You know, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. You know, and you get into that status quo that. So really, now we need to make the change. Change is scary. I understand that. But if you think about it, if you're talking about finances like the Freeports, we're talking about your household, your community, your local councils. If you look at it this way, if you again turn it on its head and you think about it quite simplistically, you've got people like Martin Lewis who give advice on, look at your household expenses, right? And there's a lot of people that just don't have a couple of pence left at the end of the month to even save for a holiday or a treat, a takeaway or whatever, because they're literally watching every penny. But then you've got somebody like the likes of Martin Lewis who will then say, well, look, why don't you go to your mobile provider or your car insurance provider, look at comparison sites. They then go and do it, and they've saved themselves sometimes £200, £300, £400, £500 a month because they've made that change. They've looked into the alternatives. Well, Liberate Scotland is that alternative for you to go out and vote and actually try and make the change that Scotland needs, because if we don't make that change now, we're stuffed. Yeah. I can't say it any more bluntly. Scotland's stuffed economically. So we're willing to put our differences aside. We're willing to do the hard graft, and it is going to be hard graft. You know, we're having meetings all the time. We're leading up to, you know, doing a launch and fundraisers and all that. We're willing to put in all this hard graft, campaigning, everything else. But I don't know if anybody's seen it. I've put it up on ISP social media yesterday. This is all part of a jigsaw. You've got the UN case, the decolonisation, which is the legal side of things. And remember, we were told there was no legal way of getting out of this union. Ha ha! Yes, guess what? You were gaslit again because that was a lie. So there is the UN decolonising case. We've got now the political. We need to show political will. And we're willing to show that by coming together and working together and giving you the alternative to go out and vote and galvanise the movement. We need the international recognition that we have the political and the civic will that we want our country to be liberated and free from Westminster and our colonial masters. That's what they are. So we need the civic will, and that's why we want to galvanise the movement. But the last piece of the jigsaw, and this is where that's on social media, is the last piece of the jigsaw that we need to fit in is you next year at the ballot. You need to vote for it, because if you don't, then there's no point in the UN case. Yeah. There's no point them saying, well, yeah, you are a colony, whether it's in 2 or 3 years' time. There's no point Craig Murray going and lobbying and networking and getting at least that one country to recognise us as, you know, being a colony. There's no point of us doing all this hard work if the apathy parties, I call it, just stay at home and don't bother. So the last piece of this liberation movement, this whole liberation movement, whether it's Salvo, Liberate Scotland, ISP, sovereignty, whatever it is, all those pieces, all us working together, the last piece of the puzzle is you, the electorate, to actually go out and vote for it in 2026. May the 7th, be registered, go out and vote, and that's what I'm saying.
Thank you very much for that. And one thing that's got a movement or an alliance like you've got is much harder for the media to demonise than a party or an individual. That's why they always try to narrow it down to an individual. And then
Well, it is. I don't know. Again, I don't know who's on social media or what social media. I can't stand it. But you know, it is a means to an end. Sometime in getting messages out. But on Saturday at Bannockburn at the All Under One rally, All Under One banner rally, I had a speaker slot. I spoke at Glasgow and I was speaking at Stirling, and I'm going to be speaking at Edinburgh. But again, putting differences aside, I said to the sovereignty, and we've got a kind of steering group that we have a couple of representations from each group. I said, now I'm willing to use my speaker slot to actually for Liberate Scotland, because actions speak louder than words. I could have went on the stage and I could have spoke the way I'm speaking to you about Liberate Scotland, promote it, etc, etc. But what I wanted was that visualisation. I wanted to show people us on the stage together and actually show that this alliance has already started. We're already there, we're already doing it. So I had myself, Eva Comrie from Mindy Frindy and Alan McManus from Sovereignty. I said a few words and then they had, well, Alan tried to do a fast one. I will say, I have joked with him about this, so I'm not saying anything I've not said to him. It was only going to be about a minute because you've only got 5 minutes, and he said, "Oh, I've got this something about it's about 2 minutes or so." I mean, you're having a laugh. You've got a minute. That's it, pal. You know, good chance, but no, you're not getting it. But the three of us being on stage together, I think that actually then shows that the alliance and that movement's already started. It's already there. So that's really important. And what you're saying, Mary, is completely true, because from that whole day, Eva, myself, and there was a picture of the 6 candidates, the 6 or 7 of us that were there that day, the candidates that were there that day from Liberate Scotland. We got our picture taken and it was up on social media. The abuse that Eva and I got for having disability, being called imbeciles, being called retards, you name it. It was 24 hours of absolute and utter. There was accounts that are popping up. I don't know how many accounts. I don't normally block. I usually either just mute them or just ignore them. But it was in such severity of amount that I actually had to block them. It was ridiculous, the amount of abuse that we were getting. They are frightened because they see this alliance, they see that we are a movement, and they're frightened. And do you know something? It made Eva and I really, they picked on the wrong people, because we again turned it on his head and said, right, well that's, and then we got the support. Look at the abuse that we're getting, you know, and we turn it on its head. So then we, like, now one of the comments was, Eva went on stage with her walking sticks, and somebody said, she can't even go on stage without a walking stick, never mind how could she run a country. That's how bad it is. You know, that is how bad the abuse gets. Now, I'd actually said, leading up to going on stage, I'd asked Eva's husband if he would watch Barley for me, because I've stopped taking Barley on stage with me now. I can't take Barley on as a working guide dog because guide dogs are non-partisan. So I've got to be very careful with what I'm doing.
Is that true?
They've got no political.
But I mean, he would be seen as a. She would be
No.
Yeah.
Because of who I am, you've got to be very, very careful. You've got to be.
Reply to them with humour, and probably most of them were bots. Probably weren't even people. They're that panicking. They're getting their bots out.
Oh well, that's what was happening. But as I said to Eva's husband, you know, and it was quite ironic that I actually was just saying this. I said, you know, I've stopped taking her on because when I started speaking at All Under One banner rallies, I used to take her on, but not with her harness on, just with her lead. So she was just a dog. She wasn't working at the time. But the abuse then that I got, and then it was on her as well, like, oh, look at the dog, she's bored and all the rest of it. Like, I'm sorry, I love my dog, and my dog does a very good job, and she supports me. I am not having anybody ridiculing even my dog. I'm sorry, I'm not giving them the airtime. So what I then done was, one, I stopped taking her on the stage, but I shouldn't be in 2025, I should not be in a country that I can't actually have my assistant dog not come on stage with me because of abuse. Nobody deserves that amount of abuse, right? I'm sorry, it's disgusting. So I then turned it on its head. Once I had a couple of times that I got abuse, the next time I went on the stage again, I will speak out. You're not going to silence me. I will speak out about it. I did say right before I start, I'm just going to call on any of the trolls that are there. This is my guide dog. She is there to do it, and my visual impairment doesn't define me. It hasn't stopped me from being here. What are you doing with your lives? You know. So I turn it on its head, but we shouldn't be in that situation. So you're right. When you see that type of attack and that absolute capacity of hatred and abuse from all these bot accounts, as you say, it was almost as if the vampires were coming out their coffins and, you know, major stuff. But yeah, they are frightened, and good. They know the clock is ticking for them, you know.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to make sure you're following us and subscribe to us, then you get notified every time we put something new out, so you don't miss anything. That would be great. Also, you can click the little bell if you're watching on YouTube.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website, and we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.